Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The Kaveri Water Management Authority has directed the government of Karnataka to release 9.19 TMC feet of water to Tamil Nadu. This order of the Kaveri Water Management Authority is in line with the Supreme Court's judgment which was delivered in 2018, which brought the Kaveri dispute to an end. The Kaveri River is a major river in South India which takes birth in the Western Ghats in the Madikeri district of Karnataka. It is a non-perennial river and its water flow is entirely dependent on the monsoons, and the river drains into the Bay of Bengal. And the Kaveri River basin includes 3 states and 1 union territory, that is Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Puducherry and Kerala. There is a long-standing dispute amongst these states to share the waters of the river Kaveri, and this dispute was brought to an end in 2018 through the final judgment of the Supreme Court. According to this judgment, the Kaveri Water Management Authority has been constituted by the Government of India, and it has the responsibility to implement the award given by the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal, which was later modified by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has mandated that the Kaveri Water Management Authority should implement the final award which was given with regard to the Kaveri dispute, and the authority should meet once in 10 days during the monsoon season. And based on the water level data provided by the Central Water Commission, the Kaveri Water Management Authority should decide the allocation and the release of waters to all the riparian states. So according to its mandate, the Kaveri Water Management Authority has directed Karnataka to release 9.19 TMC feet of water to Tamil Nadu. In this context, let us look at the final judgment which was delivered by the Supreme Court. In 2018, the Supreme Court slightly modified the award which was given by the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal, and it has fixed a final share for all the states. For Karnataka, 284 TMC feet of water has been allocated. For Tamil Nadu, it is 404 TMC feet. For Kerala, it is around 30 TMC feet. For Puducherry, it is around 7 TMC feet. And apart from allocating a share to the riparian states, the Supreme Court has also allocated a certain share for environmental purposes, which is around 10 TMC feet. And it has also mandated that around 4 TMC feet of water should be preserved in order to ensure the natural flow of the water into the sea. For the sake of prelims, kindly remember how water is allocated for different purposes. You need not remember the exact number or the exact share which has been allocated to the different parties, but please remember how the water has been divided to meet the demands of the riparian states and as well as to maintain the ecological flow of water. Now let us talk about the Kaveri Water Management Authority, which was established in 2018. When the Kaveri water dispute erupted between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu in the 1980s, the Government of India intervened and it set up the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal in 1990. This tribunal was established by the Interstate River Water Disputes Act of 1956, which was passed under the provisions of Article 262 of the Indian Constitution. Article 262 provides for the resolution of interstate water disputes. This article provides a role for the Parliament to resolve interstate water disputes, and it has clearly prohibited the Supreme Court and the judiciary from intervening with the Parliament's jurisdiction while resolving interstate water disputes. So under these powers, the central government had constituted the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal in 1990, and based on its investigation, the tribunal delivered a final award and it submitted the final report to the Government of India in 2007. But this final award of the tribunal was challenged by all the riparian states, and they filed a special leave petition or SLP at the Supreme Court. Even though Article 262 has prohibited the Supreme Court from intervening in interstate water disputes, the Supreme Court decided to accept these special leave petitions by saying that the award of a tribunal is also subject to judicial review. And after looking into the demands of all the parties, the Supreme Court delivered a final verdict in February 2018 by modifying the award which was given by the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal. And it instructed the Government of India to frame a dedicated scheme for managing the Kaveri River as per Section 6A of the Interstate River Disputes Act of 1956. So based on the direction of the Supreme Court, the Government of India notified the Kaveri Water Management Scheme of 2018, and this scheme provides for the implementation of the final judgment which was delivered by the Supreme Court. Under this scheme, two new institutions have been set up, which includes the Kaveri Water Management Authority and the Kaveri Water Regulation Committee. The authority has the final powers to implement the award of the Supreme Court, whereas the Kaveri Water Regulation Committee provides the required recommendation and advice to the Kaveri Water Management Authority. And the Supreme Court has directed the authority to meet once in every 10 days, especially during the monsoon season, and look at the water level data provided by the Central Water Commission and decide upon the allocation of waters to all the riparian states. And the Central Water Commission is a premier technical organization in the field of water resources, and it is functioning as an attached office of the Ministry of Water Resources. Its main responsibility is to coordinate with the state governments with regard to control, conservation and utilization of water resources for the purpose of flood control, irrigation, navigation, drinking water and hydropower development. And since the Central Water Commission monitors the water levels across the dams in the country, and since it is involved in flood control, the National Disaster Management Authority has designated the Central Water Commission as the nodal agency for providing early warning and forecasting services with regard to floods. Now let's take up the next article. A group of scientists and geologists belonging to the Anthropocene working group have voted in favor of designating a new geological epoch known as Anthropocene. An epoch represents a certain time period on the geological time scale or in the geological chronology of Earth. On the geological time scale, the geological evolution of Earth is divided into different time periods, and currently we are said to be in the Holocene epoch. The Holocene epoch is said to have begun around 11,700 to 11,800 years ago. And if the Anthropocene epoch receives the final ratification, then we will be transitioning from the Holocene epoch into the Anthropocene epoch. To understand this further, we need to look at the geological time scale which has been developed by the International Union of Geological Sciences. This geological time scale or the geological chronology of Earth has been ratified by the International Union of Geological Sciences. Under the International Union of Geological Sciences, we have the International Commission on Stratigraphy, which deals with the study of the stratified layers which form the Earth. By studying the stratified layers of the Earth, geologists will divide the geological evolution of the Earth into different time periods, and this is known as the geological time scale. Under the International Commission on Stratigraphy, the Anthropocene working group was set up in order to study the impact of anthropogenic events in shaping the geology of Earth. Human activities such as agriculture, industrialization, urbanization, etc. have started altering the geology of the Earth, and this in turn will have an impact on our ecosystems and as well as on our biogeochemical cycles. Human activities such as agriculture, industrial development, urbanization, etc. has brought about significant changes in the carbon cycle, in the water cycle, in the phosphorus cycle, etc. And these changes in turn has introduced changes into our ecosystem and as well as into the geology of the Earth. These changes include global warming and climate change, oceanic acidification, rising sea levels, changes in erosion, deposition, etc. So the changes introduced in the biogeochemical cycles through human developmental activities has altered our ecosystems. This in turn is altering the geology of the Earth. And the beginning of the time period which marked the impact of human development on geology of the Earth is proposed to be designated as the Anthropocene epoch. You can see the geological time scale over here. It is divided into super eons, era, period, epoch, age, etc. Each supereon is divided into eons. Then each eon is further divided into eras. For example, we have the Mesozoic era. This in turn is divided into periods such as the Cretaceous period, the Jurassic period, etc. And each period again is divided into epochs. Currently, we are in the Holocene epoch, which began around 11,800 years ago. If the Anthropocene epoch is ratified by the International Union of Geological Sciences, then we will transition from the Holocene epoch into the Anthropocene epoch. But in order to mark the transition from the Holocene epoch into the Anthropocene epoch, you need a reference. You basically need a marker. This geological marker or geological reference, which marks the transition from one epoch to another, is technically referred to as the golden spike or the global boundary stratotype section and point. The golden spike serves as a reference to clearly mark the boundary between the Holocene epoch and the Anthropocene epoch. So right now, geologists are trying to figure out the best possible geological marker which is present across the world and which has already become a part of geological deposits. So the Anthropocene Working Group has suggested to select artificial radionuclides as the golden spike because artificial radionuclides are present across the world. They have already become a part of the Earth's geology. These radionuclides have been released since the testing of atomic bombs began in the 1940s. So the testing of atomic bombs has ensured that artificial radionuclides are spread across the world and they have already become a part of marine sediments. They are also present in ice layers and even in stalagmites and stalactites. So the Anthropocene Working Group has suggested that the radionuclides released from atomic tests can serve as the golden spike or the geological marker between the Holocene epoch and the Anthropocene epoch. So these proposals have been approved by the Anthropocene Working Group. This has to be further approved by the International Commission on Stratigraphy, and this has to be finally ratified by the International Union on Geological Sciences. This is expected to take place by 2021, and this would officially mark the transition from Holocene epoch into the Anthropocene epoch. Now let's take up an article from page 2. Ozone pollution is likely to increase in New Delhi according to the forecast provided by the System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research or SAFAR, which is under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Last week we discussed how surface level ozone can be considered as an air pollutant. If ozone is formed close to the surface of the earth and if we inhale this air, it can be extremely toxic and it can result in a variety of respiratory disorders which includes cough, shortness of breath, throat pain. It can also corrode the lining of the lungs and it can make the lungs vulnerable to a variety of other infections. Due to this toxic nature of surface level ozone, it is classified as an air pollutant. But ozone is not a primary pollutant, which means that ozone is not released by the combustion of fossil fuels. When you burn fossil fuels, you get a number of primary pollutants such as carbon monoxide, oxides of nitrogen, etc. So those pollutants which are released from the source itself, that is from the combustion of fossil fuels, they are referred to as primary pollutants. But these primary pollutants can react in the presence of sunlight and it can result in the formation of surface level ozone. So that's the reason why ozone is considered as a secondary pollutant, because it is not directly released by combustion. Instead, it is formed by a combination of primary pollutants in the presence of sunlight and high temperature. An increase in temperature can further promote the formation of surface level ozone. So generally, the formation of surface level ozone is the highest between 12 pm to 3 pm. That's the reason why the authorities issue a warning for the public to stay away from highly polluted areas during this period. And according to data obtained from the SAFAR forecasting system, the air quality index in Delhi is likely to deteriorate further and corresponding warnings have been issued to the public. Now let's take up the next article. After the Balakot airstrikes and the subsequent dogfight between the Indian Air Force and the Pakistani Air Force, The IAF has learned crucial lessons and it has identified the technological deficiencies which exist on its side. Based on this assessment, it is trying to plug these vulnerabilities in order to enhance its preparedness to deal with a conflict. Based on the lessons learned during the Balakot strike and the subsequent aerial conflict, India is eagerly looking to retire the old aircrafts and induct modern fighter jets such as the Rafale and Tejas or the light combat aircraft. But the induction of fighter jets is a long-term measure and hence the IAF is currently focusing on certain short-term measures. Because the IAF is already in the process of procuring the Rafale and the LCA, so right now it has identified critical shortages with regard to airborne warning and control systems or AWACS, and it has expressed interest to acquire software-defined radios and close-in weapon systems in order to increase its preparedness to deal with aerial combat. Airborne Warning and Control Systems or AWACS is basically a sophisticated radar system which is mounted on an aircraft, and such an aircraft can provide for increased surveillance and greater domain awareness which can be extremely crucial during conflicts. The AWACS systems which are mounted on an aircraft can scan the airspace around it and it can identify all the aircrafts present within its target area, and it can even distinguish between friendly aircraft and enemy aircraft. This domain knowledge can be extremely crucial during an aerial conflict, and that's the reason why AWACS are considered as force multipliers. But the IAF has reported a critical shortage of AWACS, and in fact the Pakistani Air Force is in a better position as compared to India. As of now, the Pakistani Air Force has 7 AWACS which are operational and they could be deployed at any given point of time. But on the Indian side, we have around 3 Falcons that have been imported from Israel and 2 Netra AWACS which have been indigenously developed by the DRDO. Since the IAF has only 5 AWACS systems, they cannot be kept operational all the time because of servicing and repairs. So in order to plug this critical gap, the Indian Air Force is looking to acquire a 3rd Netra AWACS system from the DRDO, and it is also planning to acquire 2 more Falcons from Israel. This proposal has already been tabled in front of the Cabinet Committee on Security, and the final approval is pending for the acquisition of these critical platforms. Now let's take up the next article. Malaysia has decided to send back around 450 tons of plastic waste to the country of its origin. This article highlights the alarming trend of developed countries dumping their plastic waste and hazardous waste on developing countries. Since the developed countries have very stringent environmental laws with regard to hazardous waste and plastic waste, they generally do not recycle such waste material, and instead they conveniently dump such hazardous waste on developing countries for the purpose of recycling. Until recently, India and China were the largest recipients of such hazardous waste material which was being dumped from the developed countries. But after India and China banned the import of plastic waste and hazardous waste, such waste material is being diverted towards other Southeast Asian countries, including Malaysia. So Malaysia is staring at a huge environmental problem because of the huge quantities of plastic waste which is being dumped on the country from the developed countries. So right now the government of Malaysia has taken a firm decision to send back around 450 tons of plastic waste back to the country of its origin. This includes a list of countries such as Australia, United States, Canada, Japan, etc. Now let's take up the next article. Sri Lanka, Japan and India have signed a deal to develop the East Container Terminal at the Colombo port. This is a significant development because the East Container Terminal of the Colombo port is located just a few kilometers away from the financial port city which has been backed by China, and the East Container Terminal is of great economic significance to India because a large part of its exports and imports pass through the Colombo port. So India has tied up with Japan to jointly develop the East Container Terminal, and this project will not only promote India's economic interests but it will also promote India's strategic interests, which is to counter China's rising influence in the Indian Ocean region. According to the agreement, the project will be owned entirely by Sri Lanka, but it will be developed and operated jointly by all the three countries, that is India, Japan and Sri Lanka. And Japan is financing this project through a soft loan, which provides for an extended time period and very low interest rates. The terms of the loan would be very simple, and the time period would be around 40 years, and the interest rates are extremely low, which is around 0.1%. Such soft loans are provided by Japan to developing countries as a part of its overseas development assistance. And India has tied up with Japan to execute this project, and the exact details of India's involvement in this project is yet to be revealed by the Indian government. And the East Container Terminal project is also significant because last year this project had become highly controversial in Sri Lanka because the involvement of India in this project was opposed by President Maithripala Sirisena, but India enjoyed the support of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, and this conflict between the President and the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka over India's involvement in the East Container Terminal project had resulted in a major controversy in the island nation. Now let's take up the practice questions. Which of the following convention deals with transboundary movement of hazardous waste? The correct answer is option B, the Basel Convention. Now let's take up the second question. Which of the following statements are correct? Article 262 of the Indian Constitution deals with interstate water disputes. This is a correct statement. It empowers the Supreme Court to decide on such matters. This is a wrong statement because Article 262 empowers the Parliament to deal with interstate water disputes. It in fact prohibits the Supreme Court from interfering in interstate water disputes. So the correct answer is option A, one only. Now let's take up the third question. Which of the following are considered as sources of benzene emissions? The correct answer is option D, all the above. It is released from vehicle exhausts, volcanoes and forest fires. It is also released from a few industrial activities as well. And as compared to natural emissions, the man-made emissions of benzene is very high. Now let's take up the map-based question. Which of the following is not a tributary of the Kaveri river while it flows in Karnataka? The correct answer is option A, Amravati. Amravati flows in Tamil Nadu, whereas the other three, they flow in Karnataka. Now let's take up a question from the 2017 Prelims paper. Consider the following statements. Climate and Clean Air Coalition to reduce short-lived climate pollutants is a unique initiative of G20 group of countries. The CCAC focuses on methane, black carbon and HFCs. Which of the above statements are correct? The first statement is wrong, whereas the second statement is correct. Because the Climate and Clean Air Coalition is an initiative of the United Nations Environment Programme along with 6 other countries. It is not an initiative of G20. And its main focus is on short-lived climate pollutants such as methane, black carbon, hydrofluorocarbons and ground-level ozone. So the correct answer is option B, 2 only. So this concludes the discussion for today. Thanks for watching.